Khamzat Chimaev versus Kamaru Usman took place at UFC 294. Khamzat Chimaev won by majority decision. Two judges gave it 29-27. One judge gave it 28-28, a draw. So I was really surprised when the fight was over, man. I went over social media. I was looking online. I was watching MMA Guru, Lucas Tracy, a lot of different YouTubers, and saying, not just YouTube, on Twitter as well, like, what do people think? Was it a robbery? Was it not a robbery? And if I was to put it into a percentage, I'd say like 70% of people had it a draw, 15% of people had it Kamaru Usman, and 15% of people had it Khamzat Chimaev. So in other words, this fight was about 85% people who thought it was either a draw or Usman, and only 15% of people who thought it was a clear Chimaev win. I was a bit confused by that. I thought it was, after I watched it, I was like, it was a bit of a slow-paced fight. Kind of, both guys were really cautious after the first. Only the first round was really clear towards Chimaev. But I had it 29-27 Chimaev as well. And I felt kind of weird because everybody was disagreeing with me. And I decided to rewatch it. And after rewatching it, my opinion is more clear. I really do think Chimaev won this round. Or, excuse me, he won the fight 2-1 against Usman. And I'm here to kind of break down why I feel that is, go through each round, and kind of tell you, I went about it in a unique way. When I rewatched the fight, I didn't just rewatch it on like UFC Fight Pass. I kind of did a different thing that I typically don't do. Now, with that being said, before I even start, I want to make it very clear that there's going to be people who are going to go, you're just a Chimaev fanboy, you just dislike Usman or something like that. I want to make it very clear, I am a Alex Pereira fanboy. I am not a fanboy of Chimaev. I'm not a fanboy of anybody else in the sport. I have people who I enjoy. If I was to do a top 10 favorite UFC fighters currently list, Chimaev would probably maybe be number 10, number 9. But I don't particularly dislike Usman or dislike that fighter, this fighter. I'm a fan of fighting. Of course, I'm a fan of Chimaev. But when it comes to people who I cope for, people who I'll make excuses for, that is Alex Pereira. If he gets knocked out by Yuri Prochazka, just understand that you're going to see me cope about it quite a bit. Even though I like Yuri Prochazka, I am not here to make excuses or anything like that. I like both fighters. I definitely like Chimaev more. But I respect Usman a lot for taking this fight on short notice. And if I thought Usman had won, I would be very honest with you guys about that. So now that I got all that out of the way, none of that nonsense about being a fanboy, I'm really trying to explain to you why I think Chimaev won this fight. Starting with round one, this was a 10-8. End of discussion. I know some people were like, well, I don't think it was a 10-8, it was a 10-9. And a lot of people nowadays, they keep going that, oh, we're in a, what do you call it, a damage-based scoring system now. It's all about damage. And a lot of you guys know it's damage-based, but how many people actually know what determines a 10-8? How many people have read the rules? So it's quite long, and I'm not going to put out the whole thing. But if you look at the unified rules, a judge must consider giving the score 10-8 when a fighter shows dominance in the round, even though no impactful scoring against the opponent was achieved. Dominance, guys. If a fighter has another fighter's back for over 3 minutes, we have to consider that complete dominance. This wasn't Chimaev laying on top of Usman, just, you know, kind of jabbing at his stomach or at his body. This wasn't stomping on a guy's foot for 5 minutes. This was, you have a guy's back, which is the most dominant position. You could have a guy's back. Now, credit to Usman. He blocked basically all of Chimaev's submission attempts. He didn't let Chimaev get much damage in. But if we're looking at domination, Chimaev held his back. I said half the round, but I think if you were to count the entire thing, it's got to be over 3 minutes. And he was landing shots. It was like 20-0, whatever it may be. Usman, I don't think he landed a single shot this round, and Chimaev landed several. He also got a couple of submission attempts. This was a domination, complete end of discussion. From the start to the end, complete domination. You have to give it a 10-8. It doesn't matter about damage. You can read right there what the unified rules say. There's no real impactful scoring, but complete domination from Chimaev. Usman just defended, which again, he defended really well. You have to give him credit here. Showed up on short notice against an animal like Chimaev and prevented any sort of like really bad damage. But you have to consider the fact that it was a dominating round, and this was the only clear round of the fight. Every other round, people are kind of here and there about, but this was the one clear round of the fight. Round one, 10-8 for Chimaev. If you're going to talk about the scoring system, you have to play it fair on both sides. This was a 10-8. We move on then to round number 2. I gave this to Kamaru Usman. So Chimaev had a dominating first round, but he just was like, okay, I'm gassed now. Usman was gassed, obviously. He got dominated. But he was landing more. He came back. He was landing good shots. Now, I say good shots, but I want to make it kind of clear. He was just throwing more than Chimaev. I mentioned this. I had 2 videos where I broke down like Chimaev and Usman. And I talked about how Chimaev, I really like his guard. I really like how he blocks shots. He has a wing boxing blocking guard. He puts his elbow up and he blocks his shots with his elbow, keeps his head down. He's really disciplined with it, and he's so young, and he's just really like, I'm gonna keep at it. If you watch his fight with Gilbert Burns, the same thing, right? You think he's getting hit at a lot. You think he's getting attacked with shots, but if you actually watch the fight, he's blocking most of them. And the same thing in this fight with Usman. You think Usman's landing a lot, but if you actually rewind, if you watch it in slow motion, if you watch it in general, he's blocking most of them. But with that being said, even if Chimaev was blocking him, it doesn't change the fact he was barely throwing anything. Usman was the one who threw, and by virtue, some of them landed. I think Chimaev landed a good body kick, but in general, it was Usman. Chimaev landed a takedown, and in my opinion, now this is my opinion, I actually don't know, I guess some judges might feel the same, maybe not. Takedowns, we obviously know, don't matter as much anymore as they did in the previous scoring, but in a close round where it could go to anybody, you could say that, okay, a takedown is what decides whether one guy won or another. In this case, even though Chimaev landed a takedown, he didn't do anything with it. And this round wasn't even that close. Both guys weren't really doing anything. But it was more leaning towards Usman because he was throwing something. And it was a very dry round, obviously. And I gave this round to Kamaru Usman. I think he did enough by virtue of Chimaev not doing anything. And now we go on to round number 3. And to me, this is a round that kind of determines the fight, right? And the way I rewatched this fight, I rewatched it obviously like regularly, but I rewatched it with a live video that was filmed by a fan in the crowd, as you can see in the screenshot I have over there. And it was a really good angle because you got to see everything. And I was like, okay, this is a round that determines who really won the fight. Let's see how it goes. As soon as the fight starts, Chimaev immediately lands a good, hard, nice jab. It stuns Usman. I want to make that clear. It doesn't stumble him, but it stuns him. I know the entire MMA guru Weasel kind of back and forth of Weasel saying that Chimaev stumbled Usman or something like that. I want to make it clear. I don't think there was any stumbling shot in this fight. I think in round 2, Usman kind of pushed Chimaev back. But if you rewatch it, he didn't really land cleanly. It was more so the momentum of... But you have to give it to Usman, obviously, but it wasn't even like a heavy shot that just... It wasn't like Volkanovski Islam, where Volkanovski hit Makhachev with such a hard shot that Makhachev kind of went stumbling back. None of these guys were really landing that much anyways, and as I mentioned, Chimaev was blocking a lot. As you can see, I know that's just one picture that I've got there, but if you rewatch the fight, man, I'm telling you, Chimaev did block a lot of those. But going back to what I was saying, Chimaev landed a good shot. If I had to use the Weasel's, weak, medium, hard, I think something like that, I would honestly say there's not a single hard shot thrown in this fight. I can't give Usman or Chimaev a hard. To me, hard is when there's clear damage, maybe a cut, a guy gets dropped or he gets stumbled pretty bad. There was none of that in this fight. There was just a couple of medium shots, and there were about 2 good shots thrown in this round, like 2 really good shots. And both of them were from Chimaev, so this was just another kind of slow fight, slow round. And as soon as the crowd starts kind of booing, it's about a minute and a half in, I believe a minute and 40 seconds, as you can see there. Usman kind of comes forward, and he lands a couple of shots, and Chimaev, as I mentioned before, he fights pretty good when he's on the counter. He landed an overhand right, which literally knocked the sweat off the face of Usman. To me, this was the best punch of the entire round and maybe of the entire fight. Now, I still don't think this was a hard punch. It was probably a medium because it didn't stumble Usman bad. Now, he acknowledged it. Like, he was like, oh, good shot. But it wasn't like a really big shot that would have put him down or anything like that. And everybody remembers Usman's knockout of Jorge Masvidal, right? Like, the sweat just pouring out, right? The perspiration just running abound. And the reason why is the amount of force that's generated when you hit a target that's usually standing still, and the water goes, or in this case, sweat just goes flying everywhere. That's kind of what happened here. He hit him with a shot. Usman was planted. His feet were on the ground. Chimaev was as well. He completely planted himself down, landed a perfect shot. Usman took it really well. But again, if you watch the video, it's kind of harder to see in the screenshot, but if you watch the full video, you'll see. And the crowd was like, ooh, as soon as it happened, they were pretty livid for it because they knew it was a big shot. And again, there were like 3 good shots landed in the fight, and I give them all to Chimaev. Usman landed some shots. He was throwing some leg kicks, which I mentioned this before. Chimaev, you're fighting a guy who cannot fight on the back foot. You would think the guy would know, hey, let me leg kick this guy, let me teep this guy, jabs, push him against the fence, not let him push me because this guy cannot fight moving backwards. And yet Usman was the one who was doing the leg kicks. He was the one pushing Chimaev back. It was insane to watch, but he did land a couple of those. I'll give him that. But again, if you watch it, there's so many shots that are thrown at the guard. It's like Josh Emmett and Calvin Kattar all over again, right? Where Emmett won the fight, but he didn't really land anything clean. It was all on the guard, and that's kind of what happened here. Also, if you do consider this a close round, like most of us will, you have to remember that Chimaev did land a takedown. Again, in a fight where there's not too much damage anyways, you have to kind of look at stuff like takedown. He wasn't able to get much control time, but the fact that he was able to land it, get him to the ground, even if it was only for a few seconds, it has to, you have to keep that in mind, I think, for close fights like these. And everything I'm mentioning right now, it's more clear when you're watching this live. If you watch the live fight that I'm mentioning here, if you watch the entire round, you'll see what I mean. It becomes a bit more clear, especially like since the judges are probably watching it live. They're not watching the monitor. If they are watching it live, it becomes a bit more clear that most of Chimaev's shots weren't landing. Neither were Usman's, but the couple that did by Chimaev were actually pretty big shots. And overall, I said this again in a previous video, Chimaev is very disciplined. I like what he does with his guard. He's so young, and the fact that he's not rushing in. He rushed in with Burns with his hands low, and he got dropped because of it. But in general, he's really, really disciplined with it. And in this fight, it really shows. He was blocking a lot of Usman's shots. And at the end of round 3, both men kind of went wild. Again, nothing was really landing. Both of them were just kind of hitting each other's arms. But Usman, I think a lot of people just felt like he was winning because he was the one throwing stuff. And Chimaev was more or less not throwing anything. But I still think there were like 2 good shots, 3 good shots in the entire round. And I would give him to Chimaev. The overhand right was, in my opinion, the best shot, I think, of the entire fight. And happened in round 3 and happened again in a round where there was not much going on anyway. So I gave it 29-27 Chimaev. But I want to also make this clear. If you thought this was an Usman fight, if you gave this, or rather, before I go to that, if you gave this a draw, I could see it. And I'm not going to say you're wrong because this was a very close fight. I don't think there's any way you could give this to Usman, though. This was either a draw or a Chimaev win. Because if you look at the criteria for scoring, like I showed you, this was, round number 1 was a very clear 10-8 for Chimaev. That's just what the scoring says. It was a dominating round. All 3 judges, I believe, gave it to Chimaev a 10-8, and they were right in doing so. You can't deny it. It was a 10-8. And the only way for Usman to win was to win round 2 and 3 and have one of them be a 10-8, which there was no 10-8. None at all. There was no dominant round. Both of them were very close. You can't argue that. So this fight was either a draw or a Chimaev win, and I'm going with a Chimaev win for all those reasons that I said. Go watch the live fight maybe. I understand that as fans we watch it from the like UFC production rather than a live fan. But for close fights like these, sometimes it's kind of nice to see what are the fans seeing and what are the judges seeing. What are they seeing live that maybe we're not seeing with all the camera angles and the lights and all that. Watch it and tell me what you guys think. Am I delusional? Am I just making excuses? I really feel that Chimaev won this fight, and I'm going to argue for it. But maybe I'm mislooking something. Maybe I'm not looking at something properly. Maybe I'm ignoring something. Let me know what it is. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Who do you think won the fight? Do you think round 1 was a 10-8 or not a 10-8? Is there any particular reason why you disagree with the scoring? Let me know in the comments below, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.